quick because most of you don't know who I am. I've been in computers for over 40 years, professionally, almost 50, God help me, with in programming since I started as a young man. In the 80s, I designed video games, the stand-up units, not the controllers like you have today. I've run my own business. I've consulted for GE, aircraft engines. I got into digital forensics around 2007, and I've been teaching that, and I'm a practitioner as well. I hold a bachelor's, a master's, and all but my dissertation on PhD work. I'll finish one of these days. But that's just a quick background for me. What I want to get to is, what is Bitcoin? So Bitcoin is a form of currency. It's virtual. There's nothing actually tangible. You can't reach out and grab a Bitcoin. There's no way you can do anything about giving one from your own wallet or your purse, whatever you carry, and give it to another. It's all online. There's nothing physical. It's not a fiat currency, which means there's no government that actually backs the Bitcoin. There's no commodity behind it. There's no gold, silver, precious metals. Bitcoin is accepted as a currency because we choose, the users choose to use it as a currency. And because of that, and so many millions of people who are already using Bitcoin, it has grown in acceptance around the world. It's considered a cryptocurrency. Now, cryptocurrency is a form of money which uses cryptologic algorithms for its security. In other words, cryptology. Now, there are legal use of Bitcoin. Now, anything you can pay cash for, it can be bought with Bitcoin, assuming both the buyer and the seller agree to use the cryptocurrency. You go out to a flea market and you find something that's on a table, it's a fountain pen set, and this would be great for my father, my teacher. And you give them $10 and they give you the set. And, that is an acceptable form of currency. But you could just as easily have said, hey, I'll give you so much Bitcoin for that. And as long as both of you say, it's fine. So that's the legal use. The illegal use of Bitcoin is the exact same thing. Anything you can buy with cash can also be bought by Bitcoin, providing that both you and the other person agree to use Bitcoin. It's very much like cash. It is one way typically. So if you did not like that pen set, you go back to the flea market and you want your money back because you don't like it. Well, that person's probably gone and you're not going to get your money back. This can apply to Bitcoin as well. It is one-way transactions, therefore very trust-based. Bitcoin was created by Satoshi Nakamoto. Now, we realize that this is I believe it's called nom de guerre, where it's just a synonym. We don't know actually this person's name. Satoshi printed or distributed the idea of Bitcoin and blockchain technology in 2008. In 2009, people actually said, let's do this. And so they got it started. Within several years, it had gained enough acceptance that there were businesses starting to accept Bitcoin, and has grown significantly from there. But nobody knows who Satoshi is. People are asking. There have been people who say, I'm Satoshi. There's one person who is believed to be, but again, there's no proof. So we don't know who actually created the Bitcoin. So how does this work? I normally teach two courses. One is cryptology and history, and the other is cryptology and modern history. And we will take 2 semesters to go through all the math that's involved and also the terminology and such. Obviously, we're not going to take that kind of time today. So this is going to be a very brief explanation. But we're going to get under the hood and see what's going on. So Bitcoin uses common tools found in math and cryptology. It's why it's called a cryptocurrency. Now, one term that we need to know is protocol. And all a protocol is, you may hear somebody say it's the wrong protocol for this. It's simply a rule for communication. Okay, so when you hear somebody talking, you use that word, that's all they're talking about. It's a rule for communications, whether you're communicating a message about birth or a passing in a family, that would be one type of a protocol. Another would be, actually communicating online, just going out and searching about Bitcoin. So that's all that a protocol really is. We also need to know what an algorithm is. And an algorithm is a series of steps to solve a problem. And this is an example. Bingo. Your algorithm for making a cake. Step by step by step by step. You follow them, you get the ingredients, mix them, get everything set up, get the oven going. From that initial mixing, you wind up with some fairly yummy cake, which I'm kind of partial to myself. So that's an algorithm. Now, most algorithms are two-way. Math, you've seen this obviously at the schools that you're at. 2x equals y. So if you know that x equals 6, you know y equals 12. And if you know y equals 20, you know x equals 10. It's two-way. If you know on one side, you've got the other. Now, Bitcoin uses one-way algorithms. They only go one way. Again, do not go the other. And another good example, okay? We're back to cake. You start from step one, you do your prep. Step two, you do your mix. You go all the way through, and at the end, you've got cake. Now, the problem is you cannot go from cake and get back to where you had your eggs and your water and your, in this case, vegetable oil or whatever that you've added in. A cake is a one-way algorithm. You can't go backwards. Now, we use this in cryptocurrency, and this idea of a one-way algorithm, it allows for so much power to be used with the computers, and it's relatively simple to think about. So Bitcoin uses what we call modulus math or clock math. And you probably already had classes on this, probably when you were younger. But for the sake of discussion, the current time is 9 a.m. In 104 hours, President Biden is going to take off from the White House and go to Delaware. I think that's a weekend trip for him anymore, but I digress. So what time of day is the president leaving? Well, 104 hours equals 4 days, 4 times 24, with a remainder of 8 hours. So if it's 9 a.m. now, the time of day that he will be leaving says 17 hours here. Well, that's military time, 1700. For the rest of us in the world, that's 5 p.m. Okay. What we've done is modulus math or clock math. And we're not worried about this number of days, this 4 days here. It's not relevant to what we need to get done. So President Biden is leaving at 5 p.m. Again, those 4 days we don't use. We're interested in the remainder. And we drop that 4 for the number of days. It's not part of the protocol. And again, this is clock math, modulus math. The important number is that remainder. Now, given that President Biden is leaving for Delaware at 5, what was the original number of hours? We don't know because we don't keep any other numbers in the algorithm. We don't have it stored anywhere. That is 4 days. That's irrelevant to our protocol. So modulus math allows for one-way algorithms. Because if we don't keep the number of days, and we don't with a protocol, you can't go backwards. And now we use quite simple numbers for this demonstration that we've been talking about. Most of these algorithms are fairly easy to follow. You would think, these are, that the NSA uses this stuff, and the CIA and the FBI and such uses this stuff. Everybody knows these algorithms. They're not that difficult, but we use them with very large numbers. Numbers large enough that a computer is necessary. For example, if we take the number 54 and we raise it to the 73rd power, and we do a mod of 247, so our result would be between 0 and 246. What is our final result? For larger numbers like this, break out the computer. There are ways of doing it by hand, and in fact, my students, when I teach this part of the course, part of their exams is to work one of these in class. I'm evil, what can I say? So one useful one-way algorithm is a hash function. And this takes the data from a file, it calculates it in such a way as to create a reasonably unique identifier. I've got a file for you called hash demo. This is a file called hash demo. I'm going to go ahead and open, and you can see there's just, this is all that's in here. I am fine. Now, each of these characters is a number that resides in the computer's memory. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 characters represented here. A couple spaces in there. We have to count those as well. What we're going to do is hash this. We're going to use a program called WinMD5, and this is one of a number of different programs that you can use to hash to wind up with a unique identifier for a file or for a series of data items. So I'm going to take this hash demo, and I'm going to bring it on down here. I'm just going to bring it in. And what this has done is to perform a series of steps. Okay, it is one way, we're using modulus math, but we wind up with, in this case, a 20-digit number. There's actually 40 sitting there, but it's 20 digits in total. We'll explain that in a few moments. This is the number 75DC, yada, yada, yada. The last three numbers are 900. Now, this software will allow me to cut and paste or copy and paste. Here we go. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to our hash demo. I'm going to change this letter F. I'm going to change it to a G. Okay. I don't know what a giant is, but I'm giant. And what I've done is to make one simple change. I'm going to save this. I'm going to rehash this. Okay, I made one minor change, so it should be a very simple result. But as you can see, it's rather noticeable. The original is 75DC, so forth. This, with just one change, is now 1B46, so forth. So these hash values, if even if it's just one simple change, can drastically change the output from the algorithm. So the result of the first hash algorithm, this is from the message tested, was I am fine. And as you can see, it's a nice long number, but just that one change, by changing an F to a G, I have made a change of all those numbers of one. And that's just the smallest part you can change. It's called a bit. And I changed it from an off to an on. Okay, that's what happens when you go from an F to a G, lowercase f, lowercase g. But it made this significant change, as we can see here. Now, there are more other hashing algorithms. I want to show you one that's easy enough to use, easy enough to understand. It's just cut and paste, really, to find that information. Now, this is not just a simple tool. It's very powerful and very useful as a computer forensic examiner. I use this type of an algorithm all the time because I have to uniquely identify files or find if we have a duplicate of a file. The way I do that is to run a hash on two different files. If the number matches, it's a pretty good chance that I've got the same file, just in two different places. Oh, I never put that file on my computer. The employee may say to his or her supervisor, and the supervisor, they send their computer to me, and I take a look, and well, for not having it on there by that person, well, they've got it on their thumb drive, and it's on the computer. Somebody put it there. Yeah, we use them quite frequently. So this is a powerful tool that we use. And again, all we did was change the letter F to a G. Well, a very simple change, yet it made a very obvious change in the hash. What we've done is to take a look at clock math and a hashing algorithm, and hopefully we have the idea of what both of these do. Because now we can go into public key cryptography. And this is also tied in with Bitcoin. A crypto system is what it sounds like. It is a system where you're using some form of cryptology to do communications. It can be a protocol, it can be equipment and such. Here, this crypto system is using a single key, and this is a symmetric key crypto system. In other words, one character generates the encrypted character, and that encrypted character can go back to its original character. Because we've got this message here, as you can see, IFO, I'm not going to try to read the rest of that. But this is an example of symmetric key cryptography. You'll also find these in a lot of newspapers under CryptoQuip or CryptoQuote. They're just simple substitution algorithm. The main problem, though, with this type of crypto system is key distribution. And you are on this side of the planet, you have a friend on the other side of the planet, and you want to communicate with that friend by using old-fashioned mail. Yes, I know. Not many people use mail anymore, but it helps the idea here. You are trying to get the key to a code that you're going to use with your friend. Okay, if you mail it, it could be intercepted through the post office, either here or on its way to Japan. If you send someone with the key, that person may be open to just being curious and take a look, or if it's important, he or she may decide to sell a copy of that key to a third party. This happens quite often, especially before the computer age. Take a look at history of World War I, World War II cryptology, code making and code breaking. It's very interesting. So keeping our key safe and so it doesn't fall into someone else's hands, we've got this key problem. So we can use public key cryptography. Now, this is an asymmetric key crypto system. A symmetric means you have one that matches to the other. This doesn't. Now, suffice it to say that explaining the math behind this will take a lot more time. If you're interested, take a look at a book called The Code Book by Simon Singh. Came out in 2000. It's hard to find. I found it's one of the easiest books. In fact, when I teach my course, I tell students about a month ahead of time, start looking for a copy of this book. And it explains things very clearly, very understandably. Even the stuff we're going to talk about here is explained well. So public key cryptography uses two keys. One is made public, the other is kept private. Now, there's a mathematical relationship between these two keys. Again, the math is fairly involved to generate them. But the idea is that if you take a message and you are going to encipher it with a public key, it can only be decoded by the private key. A message that is enciphered by the private key can only be deciphered by the public key. So, as a quick example, I have a key pair like this. I have a private key, which is on my computer, and there's a public key, which is posted. And there are literally sites that have this information, but that's why they're called public keys. Everybody can get to it. So if someone gets my public key, they want to send me a message, they can use that public key. It cannot be deciphered by the public key. It can only be deciphered by my private key on my computer. And if I decide to send a message from my computer, okay, I can send from using my private key and send it to someone, and I'm not worried about someone seeing the message. Well, they or other people can look for my public key and use that and decipher the message. And again, this is a mathematical relationship. It's wonderful math. If you're into mathematics, and I'm a nerd, what can I say? I'm into math. But again, I digress. Take a look at that book, The Code Book. There's an entire chapter dedicated to this, and you'll understand fairly well. Both of these keys are rather large. As we were talking about earlier, these algorithms we use, they're fairly simple. But because we use these huge numbers, 50, 60, 100, 200, 500 digits long, it takes a computer to do the math in a reasonable amount of time. We as humans could do that, but of course it's going to take a long time just to break one message. Yeah, we don't want to do that. Now, the public key, again, is posted online. It's easily available for anyone to use. The private key would reside on my storage device, my thumb drive or hard drive, whatever that you're going to store it on. You could conceivably write it down as well, as long as you keep it to yourself. Okay, nobody can break a message that you've enciphered with the private key, and if someone has used your public key to send you a message, that's the only key that's going to crack it. A fascinating way that the math works. So I want to send a message. I don't want anybody to read it. I go online, I find your public key. I have a program that's going to encipher my message. I then email that enciphered message to you. If the message is intercepted, it can't be deciphered by the public key again. You can only do it by the private key. And it works in reverse, as we've already been talking about. Now, with Bitcoin, by making one key public and the other key private, this key distribution problem inherent in symmetrical systems, that's solved. Because again, my friend on the far side of the planet in Japan can use my public key in cipher, and I'll be the only one who can read the message. I could actually get his public key to send a reply back. I encipher it on my machine, and only his computer is going to be able to decipher it for him. It's a powerful tool here. For example, we use it with digital signatures, which also is part of Bitcoin. I'll explain here in a second. A digital signature uses public key cryptography to quote unquote sign a message. And this allows the message to be authenticated. Authentication involves hashing the message to produce a digest. Okay? And this is basically taking, let's say we're doing an agreement for the sake of discussion. You're hiring me to do some work on a computer. You suspect something criminal's been going on, and Professor Carver would like to hire you to go ahead and do this. I like that word hired you to, but we'll leave that alone. A lot of the information can be public. I'm not worried about that, but to confirm that what I am sending to this other person actually comes from me, the message will be sent in the clear. Along with that message, we make a hash just of that data in that message. That hash, as you've seen, is 20 character number. And I'm going to take my private key, and I'm going to take that hash number, and I'm going to encipher it with my private key. And I'm going to take that, and I'm going to send that out along with my public key. Now, if people can find my public key easily enough, I just throw it in for convenience. But I send it to this other person, and they use my public key. They go online, find, okay, that's Tim Carver's, and they are able to see that I actually sent that. These are considered contracts. Unfortunately, are becoming more and more legally accepted. The worry there is that if you have a legal agreement and someone gets your computer, they can really get you into trouble. That's why you want to be very careful with your private keys. But this is the easiest way. We're not taking the entire message, that entire contract, and hashing it, or encoding it, enciphering it. We're just doing that one little line, because you may have 10, 12 pages worth of documents. It's going to take time to encipher that whole thing. Whereas if you're just taking the hash, and the chances of a collision occurring, that does happen, not that often, but And taking that hash and ciphering it, sending that, it confirms that it came from you. Now, anyone can verify the signature by computing the hash of the message, decrypting the signature with the signer's public key, with my public key, compare the computed digest, okay, what they just calculated, with the decrypted digest, okay, that short message, that hash. They compare those two and they match. It came from me, or at least my computer. And again, if it matches, the message is considered to be original, confirmed to have come from the signer. Again, be careful with these, because somebody gets to your computer. If you're using your cell phone for this purpose, don't let them get your cell phone, because if somebody gets those keys, you're in trouble. And the most important that's got here is security for the public key cryptology. And digital signatures depends on the secrecy of that private key. Now let's take this information and see how Bitcoin works. We're going to talk about Alice and Bob. When you get into cryptology, they'll talk about Alice and Bob and this evil person. Someone's trying to get the message, and always a woman, and we call her Eve. Okay, I guess for evil or something, kind of short along that line. But we're going to talk about Alice and Bob, and these are, again, very common names when we deal with cryptology and examples. So Alice found Bob on the Silk Road website. The Silk Road originally, and still does because it keeps getting resurrected, yes, they are known for selling illegal goods, okay, contraband. But they're also known for selling very legitimate items. But everything is done with Bitcoin. So Alice found Bob on the Silk Road website. Bob makes and sells Angora wool socks. They're a little scratchy at first, but they wear and they're also comfortable, but I digress. Now, through email, they're going to agree upon 0.00016 Bitcoin. You'll see BTC used as an abbreviation for Bitcoin. Now, just as an FYI, 9:15 this morning, I went online and I found that the price for one Bitcoin is $63,161. When I first got into this, I was brought in with law enforcement because I've been doing some research, and they said we need more of this done, so I did it. At the time, that was January of 2013, and Bitcoins were $20 a pop. I kept thinking, I'll go out and buy, 5 or 6, maybe drop a couple $100, and I can play with it. Had I done that, I could retire by now, because that would be good money, well over $100,000. Not, comfortably live on, but I'd find out, no, that would be more than that. But again, I digress. So just for the sake of discussion, I round that up to $64,000 per year, and the agreed upon price comes to roughly $10 for the socks. I know what you're thinking. Those are expensive socks, Mr. Carver. Yes, but they are comfy. All right. Now, Alice is going to send Bob her source address. Now, the address in Bitcoin is a user's public key. Okay? Alice has her private key on her system. She's using software, what we call it Bitcoin Core, CORE software. And Alice is going to use that Bitcoin Core software, again, send this information to Bob. Now, Bob is going to send Alice the destination address, his public key. And this is essentially where he wants to transfer the amount of Bitcoin, that 0.00016 Bitcoin, from Alice's computer to his computer. So each of these represents a public key and a private key stored in each other's wallet file. Now, there are other types of software that's available for different devices. I'm staying with computers because pretty well most everybody knows about computers and comfortable with them. Cell phones, not everybody for the most part, but we'll leave that be for now. So using this Bitcoin Core software on her computer, Alice sends Bob that requested amount of Bitcoin. The transaction is generated on Alice's computer. It's stored as a message. That message is hashed, and the hash is signed with Alice's private key. So it's enciphered with her private key. The message, the hash, and the public key are sent to every other user of Bitcoin. Okay? Message might read like this: send our 00016 Bitcoin to this address. That's Bob's address. The hash is not sent, but that's what the hash number is. When we encrypt that hash, okay, using a program like I just showed you, this would be the result. And the public key necessary to decrypt this hash is shown. This is sent on an outline, but all this is what's necessary that Alice is going to send to Bob. The message for the transfer, the encrypted hash, and the public key. Now, all that gets sent as a transaction. Now, Bitcoin uses a base 58 number system. You've heard of base 10, that's what we use. You probably heard about base 2, which is used in computers. Base 8, which is used in computers way back in the old days. And base 16, which we use quite a bit today. Base 58 uses all the lowercase letters, all the uppercase letters, the numbers, with the exception of using the letter O and the number O, and the letter O is the capital letter O. It also excludes the letter L and the letter I, because the one or the L can be mistaken for a 1, so can this letter I. And we don't want to have confusion. So we just keep those as from part of our work. So the message is hashed. That encrypted hash is decrypted using Alice's public key. If everything works, the transaction is considered valid so far. Because the message can only have come from Alice's wallet, anybody can verify the transaction. This means that every transaction is using Bitcoin as public knowledge because everyone has the same ledger. The transactions are public, but the actual user names are unknown except Alice and Bob, and even then they might not be. Do you know who this address belongs to? If you were to go out and search for it, you won't find it. The address is what everybody sees, not the name. And that's why Bitcoin is considered anonymous, because we do not see that. So we send this message. Now, she had some additional Bitcoin in that address. That additional gets sent back to her computer into a brand new address in her wallet. Because the address changes every time, this is like having a message and changing the key every time. In cryptology, it's nearly impossible to crack a message that's being done that way if you don't repeat the message. So this is a very good way of communicating the transactions and maintaining them. The idea of never using the same address makes Bitcoin transactions nearly impossible. Bob waits patiently for the transfer. It's verified and added to the ledger. That's called the blockchain. And adding a transaction fee encourages users to mine for the Bitcoin. And are there any questions from anybody?
One of the questions that is popping up is with the Bitcoin and your explanation of it being secure and no one really seeing the transactions as far as who it's from, but it's all in a public ledger. Your point that it's not backed up by any fiduciary environment, and we see the volatility in Bitcoin going up and down. In your opinion, in your perspective, is this still a hobby, or is this something that you see as a reliable means of international transactions?
Both. It can be considered a hobby from the point of view that people are investing in Bitcoin. They're hoping that it continues to rise in price and people will make profit off of it. But Bitcoin already is accepted as an international standard again, by the users. There are governments that actually support Bitcoin. If I remember correctly, India, for one. China will allow for private business to use Bitcoin, but government cannot use Bitcoin. I don't understand that myself. There was recently a town, I believe, in Mexico that has their economy entirely is based on Bitcoin. So it all depends on, I guess, where you're at the time. If you have $1,000 and you want to buy $1,000 worth of Bitcoin and hope that it goes up and continues to grow even more than it already has, that would be, I guess, business or such. But there are people who already use it now for business transactions, legal and otherwise. And that's the downside, because you don't have to actually have something physical. But as long as everybody agrees that the Bitcoin is currency, you do something illegal in the United States, you want to transfer that to another country, instead of taking a suitcase full of cash, which if you're caught at the border with can be confiscated, instead you send it by Bitcoin. And you get to your destination and you withdraw from Bitcoin to that local currency. Without even having to pay a currency change or transfer fee.
Well, that's extremely interesting. I don't know if I personally want to exchange my paper for a bit, and I feel very comfortable with that American dollar or the euro in my hand, or even the pesos when we were down in Cozumel. So I think right now my personal intention is to keep with the paper.
Well, I was thinking how Tim really kind of wrapped up for me, because I don't own Bitcoin, and I don't think most of us do. And certainly our students out there watching probably don't have Bitcoin either, although some of them may, and some of them may be interested in it. But I think it's interesting how, the basics of the math and the algorithms are concepts that students can understand, that the idea that we use an algorithm to create this hash value that then is used to really sort of hide all the information and make it secure so we can have a transaction and communicate. But that what's different is with Bitcoin is everybody can see the transaction in the open. I think that's the curious part of it, where, throughout history, all those other communications are as secret as possible. You know what I mean?
And I'd like to leverage your conversation there, Jen. And one of the things we hear from our students, and many of the questions we get, is what do I need to take in school to be in cybersecurity? And I think, Tim, you just proved that if you really enjoy math and you like math, math is the essence of making and breaking codes. And so if you are a math person and like mathematics, or ever wondered in class, what am I ever going to use this for? You can obviously see by Tim's description that math is extremely useful and beneficial to our country to secure our information, and in this case, secure Bitcoin.
One of the things to keep in mind is that math is not an absolute. Okay, if you're doing this kind of work, yes. If you're going to do a lot with computers, yeah, the math is important, because the math is going to teach you the logic and the step-by-step and the ability to build that step-by-step. But even more so, you have to have that interest in the first place and that drive. Mm-hmm. Because you are going to go, if you're going into anything with computers, and especially with cybersecurity, this field changes almost on a daily basis. When I got into forensics, it was all computers. 2007 comes along, and this gentleman comes along. He's got this thing called an Apple smartphone. And now we've got smartphones, we've got personal devices that hold on to data. We've got our own home devices. We've got our smart televisions. And all this holds data for us. And from the cybersecurity, because I do digital forensics, That's reactive. So I have to be able to look at all these different types of equipment and pull data off that might be relevant to an investigation. And that's going to be one of the main things to keep in mind, is that you're going to have change as we have more and more devices. This is I won't say this growing field. The demand is here now. And you're going to be graduating from high school in the next 10 years. This is a good direction to go to.
Tim, thank you so much for your time and presenting all of this and really breaking it down in a way that, and building us up to how a Bitcoin transaction can even occur and why people would want to mine them. And that's all from us from the CryptLogic Foundation today. So thank you all for being here with us. Bye-bye.
Have a great day.